What we're doing today, this is called the Teardrop necklace pendant, and the way I start it is, so I've got my spacer, it's a 9-section spacer that I've added a couple of jump rings to, and this is what the pendant is going to hang off of. Here's one that I've already completed, so you can see where we're going with this. So we've got 7 teardrop beads here, and the point is to have light and dark beads to where the dark beads form horizontal lines. It just kind of looks a little bit cool that way. I like it. And another thing is another goal is to make sure that each bead section is dropping down from a separate hole in the spacer. So we're using 7 of the interior spacer holes for the beads, whereas the 2 exterior spacer holes are for the jump rings. All right. And to start with, to connect our thread to the spacer, I'm going to use a lark's head knot, which is simply, we're just doing a loop. So for our first section, it's going to be the outer section. So it's going to be 3 light colored beads, 1 dark, 2 light colored beads, 1 dark, hopefully they won't jump away from you, 2 light colored beads, and a dark, now we add our teardrop bead, then we're going to have another dark, 2 light colored beads, a dark bead, and 2 light colored beads. All right, to complete the loop for this teardrop is we need to make sure that our lower section beads are separate from the upper section. So the lower section are the beads that go right next to the teardrop. So we've got a dark, 2 lights, a dark, and 2 lights on either side of the teardrop. And then on the upper part that we're going to realign our thread through, this is going to basically be the stem of the teardrop section. And I find it easiest if I push the beads against my finger. It opens up the holes in the beads, so when you rethread through, you're not catching the thread from the first time through. And that way you'll be able to tighten your beads up against the spacer, and they will do what they are supposed to do. And that is how they're supposed to look. So now we're going to go back up through our spacer, and this is when we get to add basically a row of what I call the camouflage beads. They'll lay across the top of the spacer, and they'll help cover up all the threads from all the other bead sections. So this is going to be a series of 14 beads. And then we're going to come down the second opening from the opposite end. And that leaves our spacer bead, our camouflage beads at the top. And I'll show you more about that as we go along, because it'll make more sense as to what's going on with those. So now we're going to do the teardrop at the opposite end, which is going to be the same size as the one we've just done. And what I've done here is I've laid out my beads. So the ones we've already put on and this group of beads are for the ends. The next set is for the next set in, and this set is for the ones on either side of the center, and this set of beads is for the center. And the way I'm going to be doing this, aside from getting the two, once I get this end section in, then I'll just start going in sequence across to end up over here. And that way we'll have all of the teardrop segments in sequence and not just jumping from one end to the other, because then we'll just wind up with a bunch of mess up here if we did it that way. This way it should come out tidy. Okay, so I'm just going to get my beads for this section. So it's 3 lights, a dark, and that's the primary stem section for the beads, and this is going to be the loop section that goes on either side of the teardrop bead itself. So 2 lights, a dark, 2 lights, and another dark. Now the teardrop bead. The dark, 2 lights, dark, and 2 more lights. All right, and again, just like the first section, we separate out the loop from the stem. Run the needle back through the, in this section, the 4 stem beads. And we pull the thread tight up against the spacer. This is where we start establishing the pattern for locking in the beads. So you go back up the same opening you came down from on the spacer. That way all of your stems are hanging down from the same section from below. And to help make it a little bit more secure, I'm going to go down the hole next to the one I just came up on, and then come back up the previous opening again, just to give it a little bit more stability. And then I'm just going to go down the third opening. So I'm at the third opening along the spacer bead, and so I'm going to do the next teardrop section. So it's going to be the stem portion of the next teardrop section is going to be 2 sets of 3 with each of the dark beads, and then the loop section is going to be the same size as it is here. It's going to be the 2 lights, dark, 2 lights, and a dark, then the teardrop, and then the dark, 2 lights, dark, 2 lights. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that one. So we've got 1, 2, 3 lights, dark, 1, 2, 3 lights, and a dark, and that's going to be the stem for this loop. And then these beads are the loop section for this teardrop. Again, we add our teardrop bead. And the remaining beads for this loop section. And again, we separate out our stem section beads. Put a little tension on the back side of them to push them up a bit so we don't catch the thread as we lace our needle back through. We just hold on to the teardrop bead itself and pull the thread up tight against the spacer. I like to use things in ways not originally probably planned for them by whoever designed them. So the spacer is usually used for creating bracelets or necklaces to make spaces between sections, and not so much purpose for this. So what I'm doing is now I'm actually utilizing this top row of beads for my helping to lock in my beads. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling it across the row of beads, and whichever beads are lining up over the top of the opening I'm currently at. So I'm trying to embed my thread down in between those, and then I'm going to go back down the opening I came out of. Actually, I'm going to go down the next opening over. And then back up the opening I just finished putting my teardrop in. And this is just going to help give some stability to the whole piece and help me keep the tension on everything as I'm going along so it doesn't get loose on me. And now I'm going to go back down the 4th opening and do the next teardrop loop. So you see how the beads are starting to create a line, the dark beads. They're giving the image of horizontal lines, and that'll continue as we go. So now we're doing the 3rd teardrop section in. So its stem section is 3 light color beads, 1 dark, 3 light color beads, 1 dark, 3 light color beads, and one dark. So this stem section is one set longer than the previous stem section. Previous stem section was 3 1 3 1, and this one is 3 1 3 1 3 1. And even so, now we're going to do the loop section, and that is one set longer as well. So it's going to be 2 1 2 1 2 1, and then the teardrop bead. And this is the only challenge part, is making sure that when you rethread your needle back through the beads on the stem section, you're not catching the first part of your thread. And again, you pull it up tight. You come back up through the same opening that you came down for this teardrop section. You use the camouflage bead area to embed your thread. You go down the next section, which is empty, come back up the one that you were just in. Pull things up tight. And go back down. All right, so we've gotten to where now we're going to do the center teardrop, and that's this one laid out here. So it's 3 1 3 1 3 2 and then 1. So it's got 3 sections of the 3 beads and then a section of 1 bead, and that makes the stem for the center section, because we are incrementally getting longer, so we have a cascade look for our teardrops. So you see they're getting longer, the center one will be the longest, and they'll go up again. So it's a chevron shape when we're finished. That's a stem section for the center teardrop. And its loop is going to be the same size as the loop next to it. So it's 2 1 2 1 2 1, teardrop 1 2 1 2 1 2. And again, you separate your loop beads from your stem beads. Put a little tension on the stem beads and run your needle back through them to complete the stem. Again, you bring it up tight. And the goal is to not actually allow the set of beads next to the loop that you're currently making to fall in between your threads, like I've just done. All right, don't let that happen, although it's easily fixed. And then I'm going to go back up the opening I originally came through for this section. I'm going to use my line of beads that I have up here to camouflage my thread and go back down the section next to the one I just completed, and then up again through the one I completed, making sure to not catch any of my stem beads or other teardrop beads in this process, and come back down the next opening over so I can continue creating my teardrops. So again, you can see the effect that's being created here. We've got the first part of our chevron. We've got 2 sections left to go, and when we're done, each, aside from the center section, each pair on either side will line up. All right. So now we're doing the next section, which is the 3 1 3 1 3 1 for the stem, and then 2 1 2 1 2 1 teardrop, 1 2 1 2 1 2 for the loop section. So we'll do the stem section first. And again, putting tension on the back side of the stem beads to push them away from the inner thread. And pull your thread tight up to the spacer so you can go back up the opening you came out of. Over the top of the camouflage row of beads, down the next opening, and the challenge is to do this without inadvertently tying a knot in your thread. Don't want to do that at this point just yet. And then back up the previous opening, and down again into the final opening for the final teardrop section. All right. And I'm actually having to move my thread in my needle because otherwise I was starting to run out of length. All right, here's the last section. So we've got 3 light, 1 dark, 3 light beads, and 1 dark, and that's the stem section. Now we're going to do the loop for the teardrop. And one of my beads ran away again. Okay, so we've got 2 lights, 1 dark, 2 lights, 1 dark, and the teardrop. And then dark, 2 lights, a dark, and 2 lights. And again, separating stem beads from the loop beads. Add a bit of tension so you can open that up and easily put your needle back through without catching the thread. And you pull it tight all the way up. Okay. This time when we come up through, we don't have to worry so much about the camouflaging the thread, because this is when we're going to start finishing. So what we want to do is we want to bring our needle through at least 2 of the beads from the camouflage row. We're going to tie a knot here just by looping around and creating a half hitch. And we're going to embed this half hitch in between the 2 beads. And then we're going to take our needle and go through the next 2 beads. Sometimes, because we've used the beads for embedding and hiding threads, it's a bit more of a challenge to go 2 at a time. Sometimes you have to go 1 at a time. This time I think I'm going to go an extra 2 beads because I really want to hide my thread. Okay, so we've secured our thread, and this is where we're trim it off. And then our next step is going to be adding our laces to the jump rings. But for now, we've completed our teardrop pendant. And you can see the horizontal lines that have been created by the dark tone beads. And it's really pretty. I think it came out really nicely. And as you work it, you'll get used to the top row of beads. I used 14 beads this time. Sometimes you could use fewer beads than the 14 if it seems like your beads are a little bit larger. Glass beads vary even though they are sized. Thank you.